The hearing will come to order. The Strategic Forces Subcommittee meets today to review the administration's FY 2019 budget request for missile defense spending and to discuss related policies with our witnesses. This is an incredibly important and timely discussion, given the increasing missile threats facing our nation. Over the past year, we have witnessed dangerous advances in North Korea's ballistic missile capabilities. Kim Jong-un conducted a record number of ballistic missile tests, including tests of 2 new systems that appear to have range sufficient to hold the United States at risk. The administration has responded to this growing threat. In September, the Department of Defense submitted a request to reprogram about $400 million in FY 2017 funds towards urgent missile defense requirements. Additionally, in November, the administration amended its FY 2018 budget request to include almost $4 billion in additional funds for missile defense and defeat activities, including the expansion of our ground-based mid-course defense system by an additional 20 interceptors by 2023. This robust support for missile defense continues in the FY 2019 request, which includes almost a 25% increase in the Missile Defense Agency's budget. While I strongly support these increases, it is this subcommittee's responsibility to ensure they meet the warfighters' needs today and invest in advanced technology to stay ahead of tomorrow's threats. Furthermore, while North Korea ballistic missiles remain the principal threat against which our homeland missile defenses are arrayed, it represents only a portion of the broader missile threat. A report released last year by the National Air and Space Intelligence Center noted that Russia retains the largest force of strategic ballistic missiles, while China has the most active and diverse ballistic missile development program in the world. And both nations continue to invest in hypersonic and cruise missiles designed to strike forward, deployed U.S. forces, and in some cases, the homeland. Testifying on these issues before us today is a distinguished panel. We have John Rood, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and General Lori Robertson, Commander of U.S. Northern Command and NORAD. And General Robinson, as this is likely the last time we will hear from you in anticipation of your retirement, I also want to thank you for your 36 years of distinguished service to this country. Thank you, ma'am. I think I speak for all of us when I say it has been a pleasure to work with you, and we wish you the best of luck. We are also joined by Lieutenant General Sam Greaves, Director of the Missile Defense Agency, and Lieutenant General James Dickinson, who holds the title of Commanding General, United States Army Space and Missile Defense Command, among many others. Thank you all for being with us today. We look forward to your comments, and I would now like to recognize our ranking member, Senator Donnelly, for any opening remarks he would like to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank all the witnesses and General Robinson, congratulations. Thank you for all your service to our country, for all the amazing things you have done for our nation to make it stronger. I want to thank Senator Fisher for holding this hearing. Let me also thank today's witnesses for testifying. We very much appreciate your time and the work you do every day in service of our nation. Protecting our country, our forward deployed troops, and our allies around the world is of the utmost importance. And the threats have not stood still since the subcommittee last met on the subject. For just one example, as General Greaves and I discussed yesterday, North Korea has made rapid progress on its intercontinental ballistic missile capability. As we await the release of the Missile Defense Review, it's important we take this opportunity to review the fiscal year 19 budget request to ensure it provides sufficient resources to continue the work of getting our missile defense systems to perform reliably and effectively. We also need to continue improving our sensor and discrimination capabilities so we have a better picture of the threats. And we need to continue to conduct smart simulation, and testing before we commit to buying new technologies. While we continue to improve the homeland defense systems, we should not take our eyes off the ball when it comes to protecting our deployed troops and reassuring our allies and partners. The demand from our combatant commanders for Aegis ships, THAAD, and Patriot batteries remains high. We need to consider how we can best allocate these systems and effectively train the warfighters who will operate them to provide the protection that is needed in today's demanding environment. Again, thank you for coming today. We look forward to the dialogue and to your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Donnelly. Secretary Rood, I'd like to welcome you if you would like to make comments to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ranking Member Donnelly, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the administration's fiscal year 19 budget request. With regard to the security environment, today the United States faces an increasingly complex security environment in which the central challenge to our prosperity and security is the reemergence of long-term strategic competition driven by revisionist powers in China and Russia. Although they pose separate challenges with unique attributes, both China and Russia seek to reshape the world order and change territorial borders. Consequently, they pose increasing security threats to the United States and our allies and partners. Long-term competition with China and Russia requires increased U.S. and allied partner military investment because of the magnitude of the threats they pose today and the potential that such threats will increase in the future. We must also simultaneously strengthen our efforts to deter and counter the clear and present danger posed by rogue regimes such as North Korea and Iran. The U.S. military remains the strongest in the world. However, our advantages are eroding as potential adversaries modernize and build up their conventional and nuclear forces. In particular, they are fielding a broad array and a broad and expanding arsenal of new and more advanced missiles capable of threatening the U.S., our forces abroad, and its allies and partners. Although this picture is unsettling and not what we desire, as Secretary of Defense Mattis has pointed out, and I quote, "We must look reality in the eye and see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be," end quote. The administration has heeded this admonition in recent strategic reviews in the National Security Strategy, the National Defense Strategy, as well as the Nuclear Posture Review. They reflect a consistent and pragmatic assessment of the threats and uncertainties we face in the future security environment. Our task at DoD is to ensure that the U.S. military advantage endures, and in combination with other elements of national power, that we are fully able to meet the increasing challenges to our national security. With this as a strategic context, let me turn to a discussion of the FY19 budget request for missile defense and the policies, programs, and capabilities it supports. The Department's budget request supports the President's direction set out in the National Security Strategy to deploy a layered missile defense system to protect the American homeland from North Korean and Iranian missile threats. The request also supports regional missile defenses to protect our deployed forces, allies, and partners. Our missile defense system not only protects the United States, it strengthens deterrence of war and assurance of allies and partners. Today, the GMD, or Ground-Based Missile Defense Mid-Course Defense System, provides protection for the nation. General Greaves and others will discuss some of its attributes, but as noted by you, Senator Fisher, in September of last year, DoD requested the reprogramming of 2017 funding of more than $400 million to counter the North Korean missile threat. We appreciate the support that we received from Congress for this request. A portion of these funds support the important homeland defense activities, including initiating work on the procurement of 20 additional ground-based interceptors in Alaska as early as 2023, which will bring the total to 64 fielded interceptors. This reprogramming also funded a service life extension to the Cobra Dane radar in Alaska and software upgrades to the sea-based X-band radar, which are both essential elements of our homeland defense. Of course, last November, the President submitted an amendment to the FY18 budget request for $4 billion of additional funding for missile defense, which includes construction of a new missile field at Fort Greely, Alaska, and additional procurement funding for the necessary 20 GBIs. The FY19 budget request includes $9.9 billion for the Missile Defense Agency and $3 billion for air and missile defense programs in the services. This budget funds a more capable ground-based interceptor with a redesigned kill vehicle, the deployment of new missile tracking and discrimination sensors in Alaska, Hawaii, and the Pacific region, and a new space-based kill assessment capability. These near-term investments will enable us to obtain substantially more performance and efficiency out of the GMD system necessary to meet the evolving threat. We are also moving forward to bolster homeland defenses against air and cruise missile threats. In 2018, we will complete the first part of a two-phase effort to provide effective surveillance against missile threats to the national capital region. Doing so will enhance our ability to detect, track, and investigate suspicious aircraft as well as cruise missiles, and when necessary, cue our missile defense systems against the full spectrum of air threats. We're on a track to begin the second phase of this effort in fiscal year 19. We're also looking at technologies and concepts that could be used to provide scalable and deployable options for expanding this capability. The Department's FY19 budget request also continues deployment of regional missile defenses tailored to meet the missile threats to U.S. forces abroad and allies and partners in Europe, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific region. The budget enhances our regional missile defense capability through additional Patriot missiles as well as THAAD, SM-3 Block 1B, and SM-3 Block 2A interceptors. Our focus is on developing and fielding capabilities that are mobile and relocatable, which allows us flexibility to respond to a crisis or conflict wherever it emerges. We're also encouraging our allies and partners in Europe, the Middle East, and in Asia to acquire MD capabilities and strengthen missile defense cooperation in order to move towards a more interoperable and integrated missile defense architecture. Looking forward, it's clear potential adversaries are modernizing and expanding their missile capabilities. We must ensure that our missile defense investment and strategy enable us to meet the most dangerous missile threats today while enabling us to counter future missile threats as they expand. Areas for work on advanced technology included improved discrimination in our sensor architecture, lasers to intercept offensive missiles during their most vulnerable boost phase of flight, evaluating space-based sensor concepts, and the multi-object kill vehicle. Let me conclude by saying that in an increasingly complex and threatening security environment, DoD must sustain the capabilities needed to deter and defend against attacks on our homeland. U.S. deployed forces abroad, allies, and partners. We must make the investments needed to address the ongoing erosion of our operational advantages and remain the preeminent military power in the world. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Your full statements will be included in the record. General Robinson.
Ma'am, sir, first of all, thank you very much. I am certainly honored to be sitting here and testifying with this committee, especially along with my brothers. It's an honor for me. As what's been mentioned is the strategic environment and threats facing our nation continue to evolve, as you have both mentioned. Our adversaries are taking deliberate steps to extend their operational reach and are developing new capabilities to range targets in North America, in the United States and Canada. At U.S. Northern Command and NORAD, we understand the urgency of keeping pace with these evolving threats. We also recognize that North Korea represents the most immediate threat to our homeland and therefore remains NORTHCOM's highest priority. I'm confident that the ground-based mid-course defense system can defeat the threat today, and I've testified in front of every committee and have said so, and I remain confident. And I strongly support the continued improvements to the ballistic missile defense enterprise in order to maintain our advantage. We continue to work with the Missile Defense Agency, the intelligence community, and other combatant commands as part of our collaborative effort to outpace the threat. I'm grateful, quite frankly, for the committee's approval of the FY17 above threshold reprogramming and support the budget amendment. And this will increase the system's capability and capacity. Under my NORAD responsibility, advanced cruise missiles with a low radar cross-section represent a challenge to our air defense systems. Russia continues to modernize its delivery systems, long-range bombers and strategic submarines, capable of launching from distances not previously seen, reducing the indication and warnings we are likely to receive from a combat launch. To defend against these advanced cruise missiles, we must make prudent investments, as you both have talked about, and we appreciate in advanced sensors and defensive weapon systems to protect our nation's vital assets. The men, the women, the warriors of U.S. Northern Command and NORAD stand united in a common purpose, ready to face the threats to the United States and Canada today and we are evolving to face the threats of tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to know we have the watch. Ma'am, sir, as you both have indicated, I'm getting to have the privilege to retire. I have to tell you both that after 36 years of serving my nation, and after these last 2 years of having this sacred responsibility of defending our nation, I want you both to know, I want all of you to understand my gratitude and my heartfelt appreciation for what you do to support NORAD and U.S. Northern Command every day to our nation's armed forces, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, civilians, and in my NORAD hat, the Canadians. What you do each and every day. You know, people say to me, hey, thank you for what you do, but I know I can't do what I do if you don't do what you and your backbenchers do each and every day. So thank you very much. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, General.
Yes, ma'am.
General Greaves.
Chairman Fisher, Ranking Member Donnelly, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to testify on the Missile Defense Agency's budget request for fiscal year 2019. I would first like to express our appreciation to this committee for its support of the department's above-threshold reprogramming request in September 2017 and the FY 2018 budget amendment, which provided reprogramming approval and emergency funding to enhance the nation's missile defeat and defense capabilities. I'm also pleased to report that we are executing those funds with the utmost urgency. I would also like to take a second to thank the thousands of men and women across government and industry who work tirelessly every single day across the globe in support of our nation's ballistic missile defense system. They remain our asymmetric advantage. Over the past year, we've been given a clear and unambiguous message from the President that we are committed to expanding and improving a state-of-the-art missile defense system. So in my mind, the time for delays and more studies and more objections is over. As I say it, the threat has voted and continues to visibly vote through the demonstration of capabilities. Last summer, I laid out 3 Missile Defense Agency priorities to help guide our actions, our behavior, and program planning. First, we will continue to focus on increasing system reliability to build warfighter confidence. Second, we will increase engagement capability and capacity. And third, we will address the advanced threat. I can tell you that the current ballistic missile defense system meets today's threat. However, as the threat increases in both number and lethality, we need to ensure that our systems remain reliable, remain secure from cybersecurity threats, and that the nation's ballistic missile defense capability and capacity keep pace with that threat. We currently have 44 in-place ground-based interceptors for Homeland Defense and plan to expand the fleet to 64 by 2023. In addition, improvements in sensor coverage to include the long-range discriminating radar in Clear Alaska, the addition of a Homeland Defense radar in Hawaii if it's approved, and planning for a Homeland Defense radar in the Pacific, as well as advanced discrimination improvements, will enable the United States to improve protection of the homeland. The agency will also continue its redesigned kill vehicle development efforts, enhance the stockpile reliability program, and expand the ground-based interceptor battle space. Integrated space and terrestrial sensors for cueing, tracking, discrimination, and targeting ballistic missile threats are critical to improving missile defense architecture robustness. This budget will continue to fund the Space-Based Kill Assessment Demonstration Program to deliver a capability to confirm intercepts for improved defense of the homeland. We're also continuing concept definition studies for space-based missile defense tracking sensors. And if pursued, space sensors will be able to detect and track traditional and emerging threats as part of the BMDS architecture. We will continue to install the Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense Weapon System on Aegis ships and deliver Standard Missile 3 Block 1B interceptors. We're also supporting the European phased adaptive approach, providing coverage and protection of NATO European territory populations and our deployed forces against the increasing ballistic missile threat from the Middle East. Our request will support continued integration of the SM-3 Block 2A missile, a co-development effort with Japan, into the Aegis ballistic missile defense weapon system, and the pre-production of all-up rounds to support the initial deployment for EPAA Phase 3. Currently, there is an operational Aegis Ashore site located in Romania, and while we have experienced delays in the military construction portion of the Aegis Ashore effort in Poland, we remain steadfastly committed to delivery of that capability in support of EPAA Phase 3. Finally, this budget request will continue the exploration of breakthrough technologies for integration into the BMDS, including discrimination improvements, multi-object kill vehicle technology, hypersonic defense technology, space-based interceptor technology, and exploring higher power lasers and interceptors that have potential use against threat missiles in the boost phase of flight. As we evaluate the elements of the missile defense system, we will actively pursue developing elements that have multi-mission and department-wide utility and leverage those systems. One such activity is with the F-35 that may have residual capability for missile defense. Mr. Chairman and members of the, Madam Chairman, apologize, and members of the subcommittee, I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General. General Dickinson.
Chairman Fisher, Ranking Member Donnelly, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for your continued support of our soldiers, civilians, and their families. I'm honored today to testify before you to emphasize the importance of air and missile defense to our nation, deployed forces, allies, and partners. Air and missile defense threats continue to increase both in quantity and in offensive capability. With this in mind, I appreciate your continued support for the nation's air and missile defense forces as we fulfill our role in securing the nation today and developing future forces and capabilities to counter tomorrow's threats. I'd like to briefly summarize the missions of the organizations I command. First, United States Army Space and Missile Defense Command, Army Forces Strategic Command, SMDC RSTRAT, serves as a force provider in support of our combatant commanders. Our 6 priorities are to protect our homeland, provide combat-ready forces and capabilities, plan and conduct synchronized global operations, prepare or adapt leap-ahead concepts and technologies, preserve and account for the nation's critical resources, and promote and foster a positive command climate. We provide not only air and missile defense forces, but also Army Space Forces. The Army has more than 4,000 military and civilian space cadre providing continuous space-based capabilities and support to the warfighter around the world, from satellite communications to missile warning. SMDC RSTRAT's Future Warfare Center and Technical Center develop space and missile defense concepts, requirements, and doctrine. We provide training to the Army space cadre and missile defense operators and execute space and missile defense research and development. Within SMDC RSTRAT, we are collaborating closely with the Army's Air and Missile Defense cross-functional team. This effort is key to rapidly developing requirements and ensuring these future capabilities transition quickly from concept to prototyping to fielding. We are focusing on capabilities that include mobile, short-range air defense, and directed energy. I also have the honor and the privilege to command the Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense, or JFCC-IMD, which supports United States Strategic Command by integrating and synchronizing global missile defense operations. In support of U.S. STRATCOM, JFCC-IMD executes these 5 essential mission defense tasks: synchronizing operational level planning, supporting ongoing operations, integrating training exercises and test activities globally, providing recommendations on the allocation of low-density, high-demand missile defense resources, and also advocating for future capabilities. To accomplish this, we maintain close collaborative relationships with the geographic combatant commands, the Missile Defense Agency, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Staff, and our allies and partners. Lastly, it's important to highlight that the challenges that we face cannot be overcome without the dedication of our most precious asset, our people. The service members, civilians, and contractors, along with their families, stationed at home and globally deployed, provide support to the Army and joint warfighter each and every day. We are committed to providing trained and ready soldiers and civilians and developing effective space and missile defense capabilities to counter the threats of today and tomorrow. I appreciate the committee's continued support of missile defense operations and especially your support of the men and women who deploy, develop, and operate these complicated systems. I have addressed in detail the full range of these missions and how we are executing them today in my written statement, which, as Madam, you said, will be submitted for the record. I look forward to addressing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We'll begin our first round of questions. General Robinson and General Greaves, you both have talked about the defense capabilities that we have currently with the most pressing threat that we have, and that's North Korea. But in your opinion, does this budget keep us on a path to stay ahead of the threat that's posed by North Korea?
So, ma'am, I'll talk first, and then I'll let General Greaves, since he's the smart one. And here's what I worry about. As I've paid attention, so we appreciate the ATR that was given to us last fall. It allows us to build capacity. You and I have chatted a couple of times. The fact is, when we looked at what KJU was doing last May versus what happened through the summertime, this capacity and this redesigned kill vehicles will be very good for us in Alaska. But at the same time, we're not taking our eye off of having a better discriminating radar. So I would tell you that where we are and what we're doing right now keeps us ahead of what's happening. We just can't keep our eye off the ball. And then I'll turn it over to General Greaves.
Chairman Fisher, the answer is yes. As I mentioned, the current ballistic missile defense system can meet today's threat. And what the FY17 ATR, the FY18 budget amendment, and this budget, what it does is increase our capability, our capacity, more rounds in the ground, whether it's ground-based interceptors or THAADs or Aegis SM-31Bs, and ultimately the 2As. So I believe we are perfectly positioned to defend against today's threat. The other thing the budget does, it helps us keep our eye on the advancing threat as North Korea in particular and Iran, as they both increase their capability both in numbers and lethality. We must ensure that we look ahead at what capability will be required to stay apace of that threat. One such area we're working with is in the area of space sensors, or deploying the terrestrial architecture to space to supplement and augment what's on the ground. So keeping track of that capability is quite essential. Thank you.
And U.S. Forces Korea, you submitted that GEON request, and can you talk a little bit about the request and the importance of receiving funding this year? You outlined it a little bit, but what is the priority for it this year?
It's a very high priority. In fact, it was sensitized to me during my last visit to Korea with General Brooks. We spent over an hour, about 2 to 3 feet away, and he impressed upon me the importance of what's in that GEON. What it does, a couple of things. One, it allows us to disconnect the fiber tie between the THAAD control center and its launchers to increase the battle space by moving the launchers out. It allows the Patriot capability to essentially use the power of the THAAD radar to expand its battle space. And then it does what I believe is extremely important, integrates THAAD and Patriot to essentially optimize use of the interceptors so you minimize or eliminate wastage. So for General Brooks being right there on the front line, that was extremely important to him to ensure that we expand the battle space and optimize use of those precious assets.
And usually items on the UFOR list are there because they were judged to be of lower priorities than the items that are included in the basic budget request. And as I understand it, however, this funding appears on the UFOR list as a result of timing. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the items that you see...
It's not a reflection of the priority then in this case?
Not in my mind.
It was all due to timing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Secretary Rood, when do you expect to complete the MDR?
We're in the process of doing that work now as we speak, Senator, and we're looking in the near term here in the spring to finish that review. There are a number of, you've highlighted in your statement some of the challenges in the threat environment that we face, so we're eager to stay ahead of that threat, and we're looking at some competing approaches to do that, but I expect we'll have that shortly to you.
General Hyten noted some difficult policy questions in there, and we heard that boost phase term on an opening statement that's a big challenge. Is the department formulating any policies to fill that gap so that you can address those challenges that are associated with the boost phase intercept as part of the MDR?
Yes, we're looking at boost phase defense. There, as mentioned, this is a period of during the missile's flight when it is vulnerable to attack. It's a challenging period to be able to execute an effective missile defense during that period due to the geographic constraints and other things. But we are looking at a variety of ways to try to accomplish that goal.
Including lasers?
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank all of the witnesses again for being here. Undersecretary Rood, could you tell me how and why the review changed from the ballistic missile defense review to the missile defense review?
In terms of the rationale, Senator, the ballistic missile defense review was looking, of course, at ballistic missile defense, defense of missiles that fly over a ballistic trajectory. The thought process was that there are other forms of missile attack, cruise missile attack, hypersonic glide vehicles, and the like that were of a similar nature in their challenge, and the integrated air and missile defense systems that the services are pursuing to provide defense for our troops in the field, our allies, and things of that nature, that it was important to see a connection there, and that was the rationale. Of course, it predated my arrival at the department to do that, but I support that decision because of the integrated security challenge that we face with those threats.
General Greaves, can you tell us how you contributed input into the missile defense review?
Yes, sir. We have key members of our staff from the Engineering Directorate, from our Command and Control Battle Management Directorate, from other parts of the organization that have met frequently with other members within the department to help construct the MDR. So we've been actively involved.
General Robinson, could you please tell us how you helped contribute input into the missile defense review process?
Absolutely. I think what's important as the warfighter and the one defending the United States, I've been able to contribute saying that I need to be able to detect, identify, track, and when necessary, engage to defend the United States. So whether it's ballistic missiles, whether it's cruise missiles, I've been able to give as the battle space owner my opinion and support my brothers here at the table.
General Dickinson, same question.
Yes, we've contributed in a large part to the effort in terms of JFCCIMD, or the role that I play as the integrated missile defense element for U.S. Strategic Command. So we've been participating throughout the process, and what we bring to the process is we bring the representation of all the combatant commands along with NORTHCOM in terms of providing that expertise and that perspective as we help to develop and shape the document.
General Greaves, I understand you're trying to accelerate the development and fielding of the redesigned kill vehicle to address the growing threat. And what I would like to know is, can you describe for us the ways you're mitigating the risk in the program and ensuring we have a capability that is fully tested before it is deployed?
Yes, sir. This development will be a gated, milestone-driven acquisition, as in specific decision points along the way where the department, not only the Missile Defense Agency, will assess readiness to proceed to the next phase. As an example, we completed the preliminary design review last May and used that as a decision point to convince anyone from the Cape, then the then AT&L, Ms. Lord, and others within the building that we were ready to proceed with obligating, I think it was $56 million worth of advanced procurement. So what we have done is we've taken great care and we have heeded the NDAA language that addresses fly before you buy with the specific wording that talks about assessing our readiness to make these decisions through either adequately assessing through test or some other method before we make these production and deployment decisions. So we will make decisions after, as I mentioned, the preliminary design review. We have the critical design review coming up in December, where another subset of that funding will be assessed. And we've got a decision to make after the first controlled test vehicle test, which will now include not only a flyout of the interceptor, but a target where we will maneuver to the target, but then maneuver away after convincing ourselves that it would have engaged the target. And we will use that extra capability to assess how well the interceptor does in the combined or expanded battle space. So the bottom line story, sir, is a gated, milestone-driven, thoroughly reviewed assessment along the way.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cotton.
Thank you all for appearing today for your testimony. General Greaves, let's talk a little bit more about boost phase intercept. I will reveal that I'm a major proponent of this technology at the outset. In the boost phase, missiles are big and they're hot, so easy to detect, and most importantly, they're over the bad guys' territory, not over ours. But, you know, they don't come from just anywhere on Earth. There's a limited number of countries on Earth that have this capability and the intention to challenge us, and that boost phase intercept is at risk. Two obvious candidates are Russia and China. But is it fair to say that boost phase defenses are not really suitable against that threat because those countries are so large and they can position their missiles so far inland?
I would say, sir, yes, there is a geographical component of it. Boost phase intercept is, if not ideally, well suited to, say, the Korean Peninsula, very slim, where, as you say, they can't go far back.
Those are the magic words. So since Russia and China are not really susceptible to effective boost phase missile defense, where is it? North Korea. Maybe Iran as well, but North Korea is where it's really suitable. We talked about lasers earlier. I want to come back to those in a bit. What is the agency doing to explore the feasibility of airborne hit-to-kill defenses, specifically on UAVs? What kind of technology gap do we have today, given what we're already capable of doing with the UAV in air-to-ground attack, that might help neutralize or at least mitigate the North Korean threat?
We are doing technology development. That is the phase of acquisition that we're in, looking at both directed energy components as well as most likely taking advantage of air assets, which will already be in the theaters in support of other mission sets executing by the COCOM, to look at those assets as either sensors that can be fed into the command and control battle management system within our ballistic missile defense system, or as shooters. They could be platforms for a new breed of fast interceptor weapons that, if placed appropriately or closely or in the right position, would be effective boost phase intercept capability.
Yeah. So big fan of manned aircraft as well, but manned aircraft have men and women in them, so they have limitations, right? They have to land, they have to eat, they have to sleep, so on and so forth. UAVs do not. How high a priority is it for the agency to explore the possibility that we could put an effective airborne net over the Korean Peninsula with UAVs, both sensor platforms and armed platforms, in international waters that could potentially prevent North Korean missiles from ever getting off of the launching pad?
It is a high priority within the Missile Defense Agency, and the phase that we're in now is the technology piece of it. For instance, directed energy. Can we
get to directed energy in just a moment? So what is the gap, you know, given what we can do with the UAV and air-to-ground attack right now, what is the gap of taking that kind of demonstrated and deployed technology and deploying it in that kind of system against North Korea. And rather than aiming it at a terrorist's home or car, aiming it at a North Korean missile on the launch pad?
The full answer will have to be coordinated with the combatant commander, but the gap or limitation is numbers and altitude and duration for the platforms of interest. And we have been doing some preliminary work on that over the past few years. And again, we're not talking directed energy, but doing things such as beam pointing, stability, duration, and pseudo CONOPS development on it. But the actual placement above, around, in vicinity of the targets, that's a COCOM decision.
Okay, I just think it's an extremely high priority, and most people probably underestimate how close we are to that kind of solution. I know that's not the long-term solution. That's why I want to put directed energy or lasers to the end of the conversation. I know that's a little bit longer, and that's ultimately the right solution, I think.
Right.
Once lasers get shrunken down so the power source can actually fit on the aircraft like that, and I strongly support that as well. But I think that we have a real opportunity in the very short term, not a matter of months, but not a matter of decades either, to, if not neutralize the North Korean threat with airborne boost phase systems, at least severely mitigate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up on Senator Cotton's questioning, General Greaves, is the technology available right now to do that?
So I'd say portions of the technology are available. For instance, the current suite of kinetic weapons that we have that could potentially fulfill that role, they may not have the distance, the legs as we call it, to execute, even if we had the UAV technology flying and ready to go. The concept of operations, or the ops concept, is extremely important with respect to how many caps you're flying, where those caps are located, the resources tail that goes behind it. But those are not my areas of responsibility. That's the COCOM. But the technology is getting closer.
Okay, good. That's good to know. General Robinson, thank you. I missed your opening statement, but I understand you had an announcement, which we're kind of shocked and, wow, you've been a historic figure. I want to thank you for your service. First female combatant commander in the history of the United States. Thanks for coming up to Alaska so much. We appreciate that. Recently at the event that we both were at, it was a great evening, so thank you. Thank you for your wonderful service. I wanted to talk a little bit, I mentioned to a number of you, General Greaves, as well. We make good progress in the last year, I think, with regard to a missile defense bill from this committee, passes in the NDA, fully funded in December. And I was out on a CODEL led by the current chairman, acting chairman of the Armed Services, Senator Inhofe. We were in Alaska. We went out to Fort Greely. Part of the funding and the new authorization is for a new field out there. A lot of excitement. We're on the ground looking at it. And then we hear 5 to 6 years, 5 to 6 years before we get this field operational. Now, we won World War II in a shorter amount of time. I can go through a whole list, and the chair is very focused on these issues, not just in the military, but even building roads, whatever. Why on earth should this take 5 to 6 years, and what do you need? I've already talked to a number of you. Legislatively, because I'm sure it would be bipartisan, to say, hey, we're doing all this. The threat is here. The threat is here right now. We need more capacity. A new field at Fort Greely is more capacity. What can we do to help you make this so it's not 5 to 6 years, a half a decade, to get a new field operational? We should try and get that done in a year and a half, in a year. So, General Greaves, I know I just pitched this to you just the other day, but we want to get this in the NDAA to help you, to help America defend itself when there's enormous bipartisan support to do it. 5 to 6 years to me is lunacy. What can we do? And I'll throw this out to any of the witnesses.
Sir, if I could start. One update to our conversation yesterday. The environmental impact statement for Fort Greely was done for the 100 Interceptor base when the field was first developed. So what we have to do for the additional 20 is an environmental assessment, and that work's just about done.
Okay,
So
good.
that's off the table. The construction of the missile field itself is an approximately 36-month effort, and the limitations involved.
Built the Alcan Highway in 11 months.
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's a long list of things in America we used to build quickly. Even 3 years is pretty darn long, right?
Yes, sir. And those 3 years are paced by the standard building timeframe up in Alaska, April through October. Now, there are things that could be done.
Build year-round in Alaska on occasion.
Yes, sir. I was about to say that there are things that can be done to essentially reduce that time. But the pacing item for the additional 20 GBIs in the ground are the GBIs themselves, and the fact that they are being procured as all-up rounds with the redesigned kill vehicle on top. And the approach, unlike what was done for the initial deployment of the initial interceptors, where we essentially have done exactly what you're asking, we are taking a series of steps to ensure that what we are designing, building, testing, and delivering are more reliable, more maintainable, and for the long term, more sustainable. So, and the acquisition of that under the current set of guidelines, we talked about that a little earlier, is a gated and milestone-driven decision process. So there are a number of folks, other entities within the department that are involved, all the way from the operational testers to the folks in CAPE to the folks in now A&S, Acquisition and Sustainment, that have to be involved and ensure that we are minimizing risk for this deployment. Now, if it was stated that there is some national security waiver to get them into the ground now and to provide the Missile Defense Agency and others with complete authority to do things, then we can, of course, move out faster at a higher level of risk. But we learned some significant lessons from the deployment of the initial set of GBIs, where we had to go back and complete the systems engineering for those rounds, and it's taken us quite a bit of time to do it, and we've now completed that. So the intent here is to, keeping the threat in mind, we've already accelerated the planned deployment of those GBIs by at least a year to 2023, beginning in 2021, going out to 2023. But to accelerate it further brings increased risk. We feel very confident we can deliver it per the timeline that we've got.
Well, we want to work with you
Yes,
on
sir.
accelerating, all of you, on accelerating that.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Secretary Rood, if I could continue with another issue on the missile defense enterprise. We know it's struggled with the increasing portion of the MDA's budget that's going to procurement and taking money away from what really is the MDA's chief purpose, and that's research and development. And why we all support the significant increase in the MDA's top line that's included in this year's budget, I think it actually exacerbates this issue. MDA's budget grew by almost $2 billion compared to the projections in last year's budget, and about 45% of that increase went to procurement. So do you expect the MDR to look into this issue?
One of the things that is a challenge facing us in the department is the Missile Defense Agency's role, as you say, as a research, development, testing, and evaluation organization. They've also played a substantial role in operations and sustainment of systems once we have them in the field. And one of the organizational issues that we need to work through is the transition. At what point and how do we transition those capabilities to the services to manage? That's been something the department has struggled with for quite some time. For the past decade and a half about that's been a discussion item. And so that is one of the things in the Missile Defense Review that we are looking at, because we want to make sure that we get the balance correct where MDA's work on near-term production, that is to say current systems, and the balance about new system development, advanced capabilities. There's always a balance about how much do you invest today and how much in future technology. And getting that balance correct is one of the things we're looking at.
I hope you are able to do that. And Secretary, for all of Russia's talk about how the U.S. missile defenses jeopardize strategic stability and justifies their violation of arms control treaties or pursuit of new nuclear weapons. President Putin's speech was the latest example of that. Isn't it true that Moscow deploys a highly capable ballistic missile defense system?
They do. The Russians have maintained, and indeed at the times when their budgets were most stressed, they continued to modernize the Moscow anti-ballistic missile defense system. I can say from the time when I previously served in government in the 2001 to 2008 period, having routine discussions with the Russians about that. And they're very blunt about the fact that that's a high priority for them to defend their capital and their people, where the majority of their population lives, against ballistic missile attack. Their basic argument is that they don't wish the United States to do that. And so I don't accept that argument. And I would note it's a new argument from President Putin. In 2001, when the United States announced its withdrawal from the ABM treaty, President Putin gave a national address in which he stated this posed no threat to Russia's national security. And shortly thereafter, he agreed to the conclusion of the Moscow Treaty, which at that time and to date is the largest reduction in strategic nuclear forces that our two countries have done. So I read very carefully his recent statement, and we weren't surprised by what was announced, certainly disappointed by the tone in that statement, but it's a new discussion item. It's a new characterization, I think, of what has led to those capabilities that we're seeing from President Putin.
Do you have any thoughts that you can share with us on why you think the President Putin is making this new case?
I think there is twofold. One, the context of that speech, the vast majority of it dealt with domestic issues. It was a bit of a State of the Union speech would be too routinized, or wouldn't be exactly the right description of it, but it covered a whole range of topics, mostly focused on domestic issues. The tail end did focus on defense capabilities and those particular capabilities.
Was it a political speech, do you believe, then?
Yes, but it was more than that. It certainly was messaging to the rest of the world and the United States, so we should see it for both. And it was noteworthy that President Putin showed animation of a missile strike on the United States. There's only one other country that has done that, in North Korea. It was also noteworthy that it's not the only time or effort where the Russians have signaled things to us in the United States. So I think while it was a political speech, it was also a message to the United States and the rest of the world about how they see us and that security environment and the capabilities that Russia is pursuing.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General Dickinson, DOTE continues to find that Army's training of its soldiers to conduct testing of THAAD and Patriot is insufficient. In the FY17 report, DOTE found that flight testing in FY17 demonstrated that THAAD training and documentation deficiencies worsened in FY17, and Patriot training remained inadequate to prepare operators for complex Patriot engagements. In your role as Commander of Army Space and Missile Defense Command, you have the responsibility to organize, train, and equip Army Space and Global Ballistic Missile Defense Forces. Do these insufficiencies concern you, and what are we doing to improve the training?
So the air and missile defenders in the Army in particular that I can speak for go through a very rigorous training program from the time that they come into their initial assignments into their units. They go through a very detailed and comprehensive training strategy that's codified and developed into what we call table training, very similar to what you may see in a armor unit that has tables 1 through 12 that are very prescriptive and descriptive in highlighting the tasks that need to be completed as they move along from an individual type of qualification as an individual soldier operator into a team or into a crew. That spans from a Patriot unit to a THAAD unit to even to a GM unit that I'm responsible for providing trained and ready forces to General Robinson in the GMD world in terms of the 100th and the 49th Missile Defense Units. But I can assure you that that training development and that training proficiency is measured on a very frequent basis and is tested frequently on the actual equipment, and we also use a host of simulations in order to develop that.
So then is the FY17 DOTE report wrong in its conclusions?
I wouldn't say it was wrong. I would have to look closely at the scenarios in which they were evaluating those. I will tell you from my experience as a commander on the ground and through the evaluations that I run, that the training proficiencies, particularly with the GM system, are at a very high state. And I don't believe DOT&E was evaluating the GM soldiers. I know they were on the THAAD and the Patriot.
So, sir, Senator, if you don't mind, I had the privilege to go to Fort Greely and watch the soldiers. And so I know from the time that I have to give some authorities that I have to the execution that happens on the ground at Fort Greely, for me to be able to sit down and talk to the soldiers that do this each and every day from a training perspective, you know, I was very proud to watch them. And I know that this training goes on more than once a day, every crew, both from my command center in Colorado Springs down to the soldiers at Fort Greely. So I just wanted to add that as the warfighter.
General, I have great respect for them too, and appreciate everything they do for our country. So how does the report come up with that conclusion?
So I'd have to go back and do like General Dickinson said and go say, what was the scenario that they looked at? What did they, you know, get a little more context because of what I watched and observed myself. So I owe you my best military advice if I go back and reread what was given.
So if I might add also, so I'd have to go back, as I mentioned earlier, take a look at the report and see what the scenario is. If it was a test scenario, for example, sometimes they will look at that during one of the MDA's tests, operational tests, or whether or not they were in the field with the soldiers at that time. So the circumstances are very important here. But I can attest to the fact that at every level within their training program, they are trained, certified. It's a series of written evaluations, it's a series of hands-on evaluations, and then performance-oriented evaluations conducted by, and often many times, outside agencies. What I mean by that is outside their immediate chain of command. And there are passes and there are failures, and we do that routinely, both in the United States as well as to our deployed forces overseas.
Okay. Well, I am about out of time. General Robinson, thank you again. As you head toward retirement and travel around, when you go to the Air Force Academy Notre Dame football game, I am curious as to who you'll be rooting for.
Well, when your husband's an Academy graduate and your brothers are Academy graduates, there's really not much, you know, that I can say that. So go Air Force.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, good to see you again, and I'm glad you're in this position. You have a background with a lot of expertise in these areas. Let me ask on the missile defense review, when are you anticipating that being done? And the reason I ask is one of the things that we'll be looking at with regard to the NDAA this year is building on what we did last year with regard to missile defense. So, and we had kind of a breakthrough, I think, politically. We had a bill that was included part of the NDAA, which was a pretty significant advancement in missile defense that was very bipartisan. And, you know, if you look at the history, missile defense has not always been bipartisan. Matter of fact, it's kind of been a partisan issue. But in this case, I think we've made a breakthrough. So I'm asking this because we will be looking at kind of a missile defense 2.0 component of the NDAA, but we want it to be significantly informed by the work that the Pentagon's doing. So when do you anticipate that being done? And, you know, is there a timeline we can hold you to that would be in front of the work that we're doing on the NDA, which, as you know, kind of is already starting?
We're at work now on the missile defense review. There are a number of real challenges that we're still working through how specifically we will address in that report. But I'm pleased that we've come a long way. So I think this spring we firmly plan to complete the report. Right now, we still have some internal discussions in the department to work through, different opinions, as you'd expect, on certain questions. But I think we'll have something soon, and I understand your point about wanting to take that into account, and the legislation that you sponsored last year was very noteworthy in advancing the ball down the field on missile defense, and the NDAA markup schedule is certainly something that we would want to take into account.
Great. So you think sometime in April? I mean, I'm gonna try and hold you to something here, Mr. Secretary.
I wouldn't want to commit to
Put your feet to the fire.
I feel the heat already.
All right.
rising
Good.
around
I'm
me.
glad.
I wouldn't want to commit to April to get it to the committee, but certainly we'll be deeper into our discussions by that time. But I think in the next couple of months here, that is our intention to finish it.
Okay, because we don't want to miss. I know there's a lot of work, a lot of expertise going into this, but we don't want to keep in mind the vehicle that will move legislatively to enact some of these ideas and reforms you have in the review is going to be the NDAA. We're going to be marking it up, late April, early June. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. One element that we started on in last year's legislation, but as I talked to the experts, essentially everybody at the table and General Hyten, there seems to be, I would say, broad-based consensus on what we need to do more with regard to the next steps is a space-based sensors that are integrating both kind of theater and homeland missile defense. Would that be something that all of you are in agreement on, the need to accelerate and really focus on kind of that unblinking eye that kind of birth to ending, being able to track? Can I get an answer from each of you if that's something you think is worthy for us to be working with you on to pursue as a program on our missile defense systems?
Senator Sullivan, absolutely. That is where we need to start.
General Robinson, would you agree with that?
I do, but let's not forget what we need to make sure is that we can do what we need to do today as we look to the future.
I
And
agree.
so,
Great point.
okay, so that's my only thing that I would add to the conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Support. In this year's budget, we're going to talk about doing some demonstrations on space-based sensor capability, as you know, and I think continuing to build on that is one of the things that we would like to do. We've got to look at that in the context of the other budget challenges as we put together the next 5-year budget submission through the remainder of the year, but I certainly am supportive of continuing to explore that.
Okay. General Dickinson?
Absolutely. I think the better you see the potential threat, the better we'll be in the redundancy and resiliency of having terrestrial-based sensors as well as space-based sensors provide us that capability, especially as we look to an increasing, evolving threat. So the better information we have, the better opportunity and the better ability we'll have to defeat it.
Senator, if I can add.
Do I have time for one more question? Yeah.
Just really quickly, the integration of sensors in space with the terrestrial sensors are absolutely critical for the real threat that we see in front of us, the hypersonic threat, birth to death tracking, and that's why I said absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. Let me ask one final question. It goes to the issue of testing. Again, what we tried to do in the legislation last year was really kind of give cover to all of you, not in terms of quote unquote failures, but to start to make the point not only to Congress but the American people that when you are testing, even if you're not, hitting a target or a successful flight, you're learning. Our space program, you only have to look at that in the 1950s and 60s. We were, quote, failing all the time, but we weren't failing, we were learning. Kim Jong-un, I would never want to use him as an example, so I'm not, but the guy is obviously testing, failing, and learning. And so we are trying to provide you with a sense from the Congress that, hey, the next time you do a big test, and if it doesn't hit the target, it certainly would be my intention not to drag all of you up in front of this committee and pound the table and look for the TV cameras and try to berate the people with stars on their shoulders that you're failing. Because you're not failing, you're learning. So we started that in last year's NDAA. We're trying to accelerate and put you on a schedule to do tests at least yearly. But what more can we do to help you in terms of your testing. Even if you're not always hitting the target, you know, my understanding was talking to some of the experts, there'll be certain tests that we're stretching the envelope from physics, from the activities that we're doing so much that you almost think you're going to miss the target anyways, and you're still going to learn a ton. So what more can we be doing to help you in the Congress so your culture of testing is not so, you know, worried about some of us calling you up here the next time there's a missed target when we're still learning tons?
Senator, I'd say what you've just stated is sufficient in my mind, in that we're not only learning when we don't achieve an intercept, but also delivering capability. One example I'll use is the recent SM-32A mission that we just executed. We did not achieve an intercept. We believe we understand why we did not, but taking a look at what we did achieve. We achieved the demonstration of launching the SM-32A from Aegis ashore, which was absolutely critical for the sites in Romania, in Poland, and if the Japanese continue with their acquisition of the 2 Aegis ashore sites, it's a clear demonstration of that capability. We also increased the battle space for that weapon system. We flew outside the radar, the organic radar's capability, and demonstrated feeding off-site sensor information, engagement quality information to that interceptor as it was in flight. We also certified the Aegis weapon system baseline that accompanied all that capability. So we did not achieve that intercept, but we learned and we delivered capability. And what you have stated, sir, is sufficient in my mind, because it lends a level of understanding that we do a lot more than just intercepts.
Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on that? I mean, one thing I've thought is you guys could do a background briefing to our wonderful friends in the media who love to look for quote-unquote failures. They don't really understand the issues. And, you know, if you can background the media on this, that, you know, it's not a failure, it's a learning opportunity. But anything else, Mr. Secretary General?
I certainly concur with the approach. Throughout our history, the things where we've had some issues, first of all, we generally have issues at some level in virtually like every new cutting-edge endeavor. And so I wholly concur with the thought process that you're taking. And it's not just us. I think in some ways, when we look at our allies like Israel and their test regimen, they're much more willing to go back out to the test range, begin a flight test regimen, work through their issues, understanding there are going to be bumps in the road. So I think I certainly second the approach that you're trying to encourage us to take.
And as you probably know, Mr. Secretary, the Israelis are actually testing right now in the great state of Alaska and Kodiak, Alaska, so they're learning a lot there as well. Thank you, Madam
Senator,
Chair.
if I could, just one final
Yes,
thought
sir,
on that.
General.
So as General Greaves described in terms of learning a lot, first of all, I think your approach is right on. I think that's what we need. But the other piece that goes in, not only on the learning piece to the technology under development, but there's a big learning piece between the warfighter as well as a material developer, in this case MDA. And so that's actually a relationship that we enjoy on a daily basis between the 100th and the 49th and the Missile Defense Agency. So that ability to have the warfighter working side by side with the material developer in a test scenario, for example, and I'll use the FTG-15 a year ago, where we actually had a crew out of the 100th that actually executed the warfighting piece of that test, launching the interceptor and making for that engagement, is the fact that we learn a lot from the warfighter's perspective. And then we also are able to inform the material developer on the road ahead. Are they developing the things that the soldiers can use? So I would just offer that.
My thanks to the panel today for your testimony and your willingness to give us some pretty blunt answers. We appreciate that, and I thank you all for your service. And thank you again, General Robinson, for your service to this nation, and we wish you all the best. Thank you. Hearing is adjourned.